Hello and welcome to the Marketing Mirror. Today we've dropped into the mirror with a very special guest. Her name is Jodi Krangle. She is a voiceover actor, professional, and an extremely talented and artistic creative individual. So I can't wait to welcome Jodi Krangle today to the Marketing Mirror. Let's find out more about what Jodi can teach us for our branding, marketing, and advertising. I think you're going to find out it's quite a lot. I find you fascinating. I love how creative you are.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
all this stuff. Yeah, I just think it's really fascinating. But I thought I'd try to, give you the questions that stay more in line with what we're supposed to be talking about.
It's all good. I mean, we could talk about anything.
Yeah, that's the other thing I love about you. You have such a wide range of topics that you know about and that you've, experience in and all that it makes it even more fascinating. So I really appreciate you coming on again.
No
Now,
problem. Happy to.
I stole this from the Zoom guy, from the Zoom kitchen guy. I forget his name, Jeff Widgren, maybe. He says that the new business suit is your mic, your camera, and your lighting.
It's true. It's very true. I have this yeah, like here, like this little table and such. And
Mm-hmm.
normally when I'm on a Zoom, I don't bother. But it covers the area of the floor that you would see that
Right, right.
I'd just rather not have it on camera.
Exactly. And well, with the AI, people are creating all kinds of backgrounds. My backgrounds for the Marketing Mirror have been AI creations.
Mhm.
Tell everybody how you got into voiceover
Ooh.
because you're a professional voiceover actor. That's your number one thing, right?
Yes, yeah.
So,
It was a long time in coming, actually. I got into doing some volunteer work for the Canadian National Institute for the Blind back in 95, 96. So I did that for about a year, and I was reading magazine articles onto reel-to-reel tape at the time because that's
oh
what they
my
had. Yeah. So I learned about the tech and I learned about the reading and the, speaking and all of that. And I've been a singer since basically I could talk. So using my voice has always been something I've wanted to do. And that's kind of why I volunteered my time. I thought it would be fun to do. And it was, and I learned a ton. But after that, I really didn't have the opportunity to sort of transition from there into actual voiceover work that was outside of just, volunteering. And I was actually doing SEO and internet marketing when I first went out into the wider world as a self-employed individual.
wow.
So that's what I did for a
So
number
you
of
entered
years.
digital like the rest of us with a website and learning
Oh yeah.
SEO and
Yeah, I had a
social and
website in 95. I've been
wow.
online for a long time. I got my first computer in 86. So I have been using the computer and on the internet for a very long time.
But you didn't
um,
know how at first to combine your voice talent
yeah.
with that, but you
Yeah.
already had that background. And I'm just want to point out there's another like hidden talent she just mentioned. I've heard some of her singing and she's fabulous. Also, I think you do some acting singing, if I'm not mistaken. Or is that more?
I haven't really, I've done some comedy is what I've done.
I
So
love
I have a acoustic folk band that does some performing every once in a
that's it.
while. We haven't done anything for a really long time, but previously we would be guesting at small music conventions, and when we did that we would have a performance, and the performance was often partially comedy.
Wow.
So, one of our band members, it was a cartoonist and very much a funny songwriter, and she wrote some really fabulous songs, and when we performed them, it was basically comedy. It was musical comedy,
I
and
love that.
yeah, so we had a lot of fun that way. Yeah.
You have so many talents. That was one of the things I discovered in our back conversation before this interview. And that's one of the things I love about Jodi, because that creativity that and that expanding into different areas, I think that's so important. I think people get stuck a little bit in one thing and they don't see the bigger space and different opportunities and maybe limit themselves because they don't try things. I've been kind of like in a full out exploration since I hit the scene, and I'm amazed at where it's taking me.
Yeah.
So
People
that's
can be
makes it fun.
multi-passionate. I don't think that people need to limit themselves because they're worried about not having a niche, let's say. You can be
Right.
multi-passionate, I think, and still find it fulfilling and still find clients that will want what you offer. And you can just do other things on the side or, like feed our souls. We don't have to be one thing or another thing. You can be many things.
How did you go from volunteering and being website SEO into being this voiceover actor extraordinaire? Because that's kind of crazy that that's where you landed.
Yeah, well, I did that for a number of years. And then in 2007, when Google was it, and SEO was no longer exciting to me. In fact, I was kind of bored out of my skull. I decided, okay, I've been thinking about this voice acting thing for a really long time. So now it is time to actually give the SEO and internet marketing a rest and just close that up and do the voiceover because I want to be happy
So
and I don't want to be bored.
how did you make that entrance? Like, did you like make some recordings like as a sample and start sending it out to people? Because of course, in the marketing mirror, we're interested in how you go about marketing, especially, well, now you're talking from a startup position, and then we'll get a little deeper into where you are now, which is probably totally different.
Yeah, it was a longer progression. I mean, when you start a business, you are not going to be starting it from the ground running. You're just not. You have to invest in your training. You need to figure out the business backbone. How are you going to invoice? How are you going to communicate with people? Do you have a CRM? Are there other things you need to consider? Business licenses? I mean, all of this stuff, right? None
Right,
of it is easy or quick. And
right,
so when I first started, and again, it's different for every business and it really depends on what you're getting into. But because voiceover is such a creative and arts theater kind of endeavor, it has a different way of doing things. So I went and found an outfit out of Toronto that was giving courses, and I sent a way for them to send me a mailer, which had a CD at the time. This was 2007, right? And I practiced with that mailer and I did a whole bunch of things that would possibly be useful on a demo. I figured out what a demo was because I really didn't know what I needed to highlight or how you split the genres or should you have more than one genre on one demo. All of these considerations were very specific to voiceover. So I needed the coaching help. And
right.
I did have some colleagues in music in that had studios, and so I could go into a studio and record some things. And figuring out the home studio was the next step of all that, and getting a decent demo and getting good coaching. And the first thing that I really did was I went onto a message board, which was specific to voiceovers because Facebook wasn't a thing yet.
Right.
So
Right,
we,
you had to find your audience, and
yeah.
now we do it through social channels, but back then you had to be a little more clever.
Well,
And again,
actually,
because you were in an artistic spin, right? Like you say.
yeah. I had to find my colleagues is really what I needed to do.
Mm,
So that was really what I was looking for when I was searching the internet for voiceover somewhere. And being on the internet and having known the internet for as long as I had, I knew this was global. This was not just going to be me doing voiceovers in my backyard. This was me going to be selling, voiceovers to the world. I didn't want to limit myself to my own geographical space. So knowing that, I needed to be in a global arena, and the message board was kind of that. Whereas, social media is it now. It actually pushed me into opportunities to learn. The really wonderful thing about the voiceover the voiceover community is that it is really supportive, very supportive. So it's not like on camera acting where if you're in a audition for whatever it is you're in an audition for, the other people in the room are glaring daggers at you the whole time because you might
Yeah,
get the
they want
job
the
and they
same
won't.
role. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
like it's not like that in voiceovers. And I think it's because it's much more subjective and less about how you look, which
Hmm.
which I think is just a little more freeing for all of us.
Oh, definitely.
It's a lot less judgmental in a way because you're not seeing the person in front of you. You're only hearing how they approach the copy and what their voice sounds like on that copy and whether it fits your audio brand, right?
And that was the
So,
next thing I was coming to. So
yeah,
what transpired then is that you've become a driving force behind the audio component of a brand. And I feel like that's something in marketing that we haven't talked about or thought about in many years until, more recently with everything digital and with more people bringing an audio aspect into their world through digital. I feel like big companies had audio brands, and that's not the case right now. Can you talk about, how important that sound and that audio branding is today and your
yeah.
approach there?
It's very important because we are multi-sensory creatures. And what happens with sound is that it is the emotional component. So if you're really trying to make an emotional connection with your audience, your clients, your customers, for them to really care about what you're offering, you need an audio component. And I'm not saying that you can't do that with other sensory places. You can do that with your eyes. You can certainly give people an impression of who you are with what your branding in a visual way puts out there into the world, definitely. But really, the emotional content that's going to grab people and keep them there and make them care about what you're offering is the audio component. That's how we connect to our emotions. And the way that I explain this is if you are watching a movie and you turn off the sound, you're going to get the idea of what's going on. You'll see the plot, you'll figure it out, but you won't care. It's the music and the sound effects and the dialogue and hearing people's voices speak that really gets you involved in the story and understanding why you should care. For instance, I hate horror movies, but I can watch a horror movie with no sound on. It doesn't affect me. So,
Right. It's
that's,
that impactful in that media where
yeah,
that's huge.
it totally
That's a
is.
perfect example. The other thing I like about it is that sound branding, I know there were a few sounds. I remember back in the 80s, it being like a thing, like, okay,
Hmm.
like the Intel processor had that that became a patented sound that people
Sure.
couldn't copy. I know Harley Davidson had to patent their sound because
Yes.
a Japanese bike wanted to put a chip in to sound like a Harley, but wasn't really the Harley motor, and they
Yep.
had to patent their sound. So that's how important. I think people don't realize how important that sound component to your brand can be. Also, I think that might be why podcasting is so, besides the fact that people can take it in when they're running or washing dishes or whatever else
Yeah.
they're doing. I think that there's that connection that you feel with a business through their voice that's a little bit more, a little bit different, a little bit more personable than, say, writing or other genres. And I've noticed that a lot of businesses are adding an audio component just for that, just to bring their personality into their brand.
That's how it happens. Yeah, you can definitely put your personality forth I think in a much deeper way than just your logo, your visual logo. And also just to point out that the Intel audio logo, as fantastic as it is, that's not an audio brand. The
Okay,
audio brand is way more comprehensive than just the Sonic logo. So,
right.
as impactful as that was, and it was hugely impactful, jingles also play a role in that. There's the sounds that play on hold when you're waiting to talk with the company, the music that plays inside a brick and mortar store, uh, all sort, the brand sounds. Like, for instance, if your kettle makes a particular sound when it's finished boiling,
Right.
um, these are all components of an audio brand, and they're all really important. Some of them are going to be more prevalent than others because it depends on where you use them and how often you use them. The thing about the Intel audio logo was it was so popular because they put it on the end of every
Everything.
commercial. They
Hmm.
had a partnership going with just about every tech company out there, and if they were using the Intel chip, they said, well, we're not going to do our own advertising. We will help you with your advertising, and you just tack our logo on the end. And that's how they got into it was brilliant.
Powerful.
It was a
From a
brilliant
sonic sound.
strategy.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how powerful that audio logo was, because all you needed to do was hear those few notes and you knew exactly who it was, and
Yeah.
you knew the brand, and you knew their logo, their saying, you
Yeah.
knew it all in a space of less than 5 seconds. So that's how
That's
powerful
power.
sound really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that you pointed out that's only one tiny aspect, but even
Yes.
that one tiny aspect can be that impactful. And then
Yes.
imagine it in the bigger package.
Yeah.
And I would say that's even stronger, stronger. And how smart they were. I didn't know that story of how they used it with the other companies. Very,
Yeah.
very in tune, smart marketing. I think
It's key to use it consistently, and to actually use it. First of all, there are a lot of companies who get an audio brand done and then don't use it, and that's not helpful.
right,
So,
right.
yeah, you want to use it consistently, and then you want to repeat it many different times, because it takes many times for our lizard brain to catch on to what that is. And then the memory is in there, and it's in there to stay. I mean, I remember jingles from 25 years ago. Yeah. Why you wouldn't harness this for your business, I don't know, because it's super effective.
Right, it is. I always say you have one of the most enviable voices in digital. I just think you sound so perfect. Um, what happens if you have a voice that turns people off? Because some people just don't have the podcast. I don't know if it's voice or personality or attitude or what it is, but sometimes it's not working. What do you have to say about that situation?
I would say that there are no bad voices. There are techniques that you can do to improve. And one of the ways to do that is to slow down, to take a few breaths, to go into your lower register rather than always high up in the upper part of your face. There's a resonance in your face that you can use, and calming and the deep breaths and just lowering things and slowing them down a little bit can help a lot with that. So it just depends on what you're doing and when you're doing it. And
Now, as you grew in popularity and professionalism and being known, how did you then twist how you market for your audio branding, professional voiceover type work?
well, I mean, the podcast helps. That's kind of why it's one of the many reasons that I started the podcast. Obviously, I want to be able to promote myself as a voice that would be good for a brand. I also want the people listening to understand how important their audio actually is, because I was finding, pardon me, I was finding that often the people who were hiring me at the last minute. They hadn't thought about their voice acting until the full rest of the production was finished. So they
Oh,
had their visuals, they even sometimes had their music, like they
wow.
had done everything except for figuring out what voice they want to have on that production. And rather than being the bow on the present or the icing on the cake, I figured people should know how important this is so that they can think about it from the beginning of their production. So, if you have a brand that a particular vocal tone will work for, then you want to plan your video and everything around that along with that. You don't want to just tack it on at the end
So
because
it
then,
should really be part of your style guide, your is
yes,
that audio component. And I
exactly.
bet you nobody thinks of it like that. Really. I
Yeah.
bet you. So you're really impacting everyone with your message for how important it is and how impactful it can be and how it is that connector.
Hmm.
So I think that your podcast can do a lot of good in promoting what you do professionally. I see it. I
Well,
see it.
often I'm finding often that the ad agencies who listen are the ones that need to prove, I guess, to their client that it's
Right.
important. Because I often don't speak with the end product. Like I don't speak with the end client a lot of
Right.
times. The ad agency or my agent is in between. And when they understand how important what a voice actor brings to the table is, what the sound in general, how important that is to an entire production, how they can explain that to their end client so that they understand. When they do that, it makes it a lot easier for everyone involved.
Yeah, they sell you for like you're already sold as part of the package.
Yeah.
And not only that, the importance of that component is part of the overall build, not an afterthought. That's huge.
I mean, this has been, I think audio branding has been around for a very long time. It's not like I suddenly made it up.
Right,
I
right,
know that Gary Vee was talking about this in 2014. And I know that the International Sound Awards started, I think, in 2009. And I know that there are big audio branding companies like Cesium Saw and AMP and people that started before that. So, I mean, this has been going on for a long time. It's just that it was kind of the ad agency's best kept secret for a while. And
right.
then, and I even started my podcast before the pandemic. Didn't have anything to do with the pandemic, although I think that has accelerated things by a lot
Right, because
because
people
sound,
were
yeah,
online. Right.
exactly. We couldn't be face to face. We couldn't, seeing in a lot of times was kind of an extra. So, like the rise of Clubhouse and all of that. So, yeah, there's so much interesting psychological reasons for why sound impresses us so much, why it gets under our skin, why it's memorable. And that's really important. I mean, I deal mostly in the marketing, branding, advertising end of things. Even with my voiceover, that's where my voice is being used.
Used.
And I find that the companies that pay attention to this, their advertising lands better. It just makes more of an impression. And in a lot of cases, I mean, even bad audio can make an impression if it's used consistently. That's
Right.
one of the things, right? Like I hear owners of companies doing their own advertising all the time, especially in local markets. And I'm sure you've heard some in your local market where
Right.
the owner of the company is the one that's doing the spot on video or
Right.
speaking the ad on the radio, right? And no, they are notoriously bad because they have no training on this at all. They often don't know what they're doing, but they're really passionate about their company.
Right.
So if you can capture that in a bottle and then have someone maybe a little more professional do it for you.
Yeah, it
But
might land better. Right.
exactly. But even then, if they're doing this consistently, the people in that local market remember them.
I think you raise a really good point that the voice or the sound, the audio component of your marketing isn't an afterthought. It's not just the icing on the cake. It's not something to throw in. It's actually something that should be strategy of the whole packaging.
Very
And
much
I
so.
think especially now it's important to think that way. And I think that we don't always think that way and we really need to. And we should be thinking about, as we think about our style, our tone. our personality, whether we want to bring some humor or whether we're very serious, whether we are snarky. There's some brands that really do well with snarky, and even though that seems
Very true.
odd, it
Yes.
works.
Yeah.
Right. So what's your biggest tip when it comes to marketing any business?
Well, I mean, think about your sound. Often that's the
Mm.
last thing anyone thinks about. Having a nice logo is wonderful, but how does that sound? Are you doing any audio anywhere? Do you have radio commercials or commercials in podcasts, or do you have it on hold? Are people waiting on online on the phone and are generally not very happy with you when they are? Because if that's the case, you certainly want to have music that is going to calm them down or information that's going to make them feel more comfortable in a voice that might make them feel more comfortable or that at least mirrors who you are as a company.
See,
So
I
these
love
are
that.
all,
That's even more areas of sound that people don't think about. Like,
Mhm,
what's the sound when people are waiting to talk to you? What's the sound in the background when you speak online?
mhm,
What's the sound that introduces you? Do you have, a known sound? So when people hear your intro, they know it's your show.
yeah.
I think that's great because that's expanding audio and audio branding into areas well beyond just having a voiceover.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. And it doesn't have to be expensive either. I mean, none of this is particularly pricey. I mean, having a professionally done intro and outro is probably a one off price. And whatever
right,
that price is, I hate to say it, it's worth paying because that makes you sound professional. I always say if you want the way to decide whether or not you should have an intro done for you professionally is if you have a lot of accolades to your name, if you have a lot of things that you want to talk about as far as things you've accomplished and the reason why people should be listening to your podcast, then you don't want to be doing that yourself. You don't want to
right,
say nice things about yourself. You want
right.
someone else to say that for you.
Step inside the marketing mirror to uncover marketing secrets, discover gems, tactics, lessons, and campaigns you can use, next gen or fundamentals. Grab the marketing magic to improve your marketing and win more business. Step inside the marketing mirror to uncover marketing secrets, discover gems, tactics, lessons, and campaigns you can use, next gen or fundamentals. Grab the marketing magic to improve your marketing and win more business.